Okay, for this problem, we're given h of x is equal to x plus 10 over 3x squared e to the x, and we're asked to find the derivative h prime of x. Okay, so we're going to have to use the quotient rule on this, and we're also going to have to use the product rule on this. Okay, so let's do a little work before we get started. Let's call f of x x plus 10, and we can go ahead and say that f prime of x is equal to, well, what is the derivative of x plus 10? Well, it's equal to 1. We can also say that we can split this up, or let's just keep it together. So we'll say g of x is equal to 3x squared e to the x, and g prime of x, well, we'll have to use the quotient rule, or the product rule on that. We can say this is the first function, this is the second function. We could have split those up into two different functions, but I think this is probably easiest. So let's use the product rule, which is the first times the derivative of the second. The first is 3x squared. The derivative of the second one, well, the derivative of e to the x is still e to the x. Okay, and then, okay, that's the first time the derivative of the second. Now the derivative of the first, which is bring down the exponent, becomes that 2 comes out, multiplied by 3 gets 6. So 6x times the first, which is e to the x. Okay, so that's a little work ahead of time. Now let's go back to the h of x and let's find h prime of x. Okay, so to find h prime of x, we're going to take the bottom times the derivative of the top. So the bottom is 3x squared e to the x times the derivative of the top, which we already found to be 1, minus the top times the derivative of the bottom, which we found down here. 3x squared e to the x plus 6x e to the x. And then that's all divided by the bottom squared, the denominator squared. So 3x squared e to the x. Okay, that needs to be cleaned up a little bit. So let's see what we can do to clean that up a little bit. This just multiplied by 1 really doesn't, we don't need the 1, so that's 3x squared e to the x. We can go ahead and, well, let's leave the negative sign for the moment, but let's go ahead and distribute this x plus 10 to this. So multiply the x first, which means we just increase the exponent by 1 in both of those terms. So we have 3x cubed e to the x, and then plus 6x squared e to the x. And now let's do the 10 as well. 10 times 3 is 30, so plus 30x squared e to the x, and then 60x e to the x. Okay, the denominator, whoops, I forgot to square it in that last step. Remember the denominator squared. So 3x squared e to the x squared in the denominator. Okay, we can go ahead and combine like terms if there are any, and also distribute the negative sign. Let's see, there's no cubed terms in here. We do have a 6x squared e to the x and the 30x squared e to the x. That makes 36 inside there, and then there's no like terms here. Okay, so this is equal to 3x squared e to the x minus 3x cubed e to the x minus, let's combine these two, 36x squared e to the x minus 60x e to the x. And then the denominator. Okay. And okay, so is there anything that can be combined here? It looks like we have a 3x squared e to the x and a negative 36, so that makes negative 33. So we have a negative 3x x cubed e to the x minus 33x squared e to the x minus 60x e to the x, and the denominator remains the same. Okay, so what can we factor out of this that will help us reduce this thing? So each term has an x in the numerator, and each term has an e to the x in the numerator. And if we wrote this, let's scratch out this and just write the term twice, 3x squared e to the x. Let's see what happens when we factor out an x and an e to the x. Okay, so we'll get x e to the x out front. And let's see, that gives us negative 3x squared for the first term. We get negative 33x for the second term. And then minus 60 for the third term. Okay, and then we'll write this 3x squared e to the x times 3x squared e to the x. Now the reason I wrote it that way is because we can now reduce some stuff. We can reduce one of the e to the x's, and we can reduce one of the x's there. Okay, so in our next in our next term, the top is just going to be, let's see, that's equal to negative 3x squared minus 33x minus 60. We might take something out of that in a second. And then the bottom we have a 3x, it looks like, 3x, and then also a 3x squared e to the x. Okay, so let's see, we can factor out a negative 3 in the top, so that gives us negative 3 times x squared plus 11x plus 20. Okay, and then we have 3. Let's go ahead and put that x back in there. So we have 3. I'm leaving this out front because it's about to reduce. So 3x cubed e to the x. Okay, cancel that. And I believe that's about all we can do on this thing. So negative, I'll put that out front. And then the top is x squared plus 11x plus 20 over 3x cubed e to the x. And that's about as reduced as we can get that thing.